Hey guys, welcome back to another video. My name's Bluemmenfelt from Evolve Human Performance. We help endurance athletes decrease their risk of injury and improve their performance through strength and conditioning. So first of all, full disclosure, I'm not a physio, I'm not a physical therapist. I'm a personal trainer that's worked with a lot of endurance athletes over the last couple of years and have a really keen interest in helping them come back from injury with a physio, come back from injury using strength and conditioning, and help them decrease their risk of injury, mainly through their running and triathlon. So this is not medical advice. If you are dealing with an injury, I strongly suggest that you do consult with a physiotherapist or relevant rehab professional. Now let's get into it. So the first reason that we have is the fact that you are resting your injuries. So most injuries that are coming from endurance sports or coming from running specifically are these overuse style injuries such as your tendinopathies, runner's knee, Achilles tendinopathy, high hamstring tendinopathy, those types of injuries. Those types of overuse style injuries don't like complete rest. So this is where I think a lot of people are getting it wrong, where you rest it for a little bit, yes, it feels a little bit better, and then you kind of get straight back into the running and it all of a sudden is not feeling so great anymore. What do we do? So we want to find exercises that load these areas up, and it's actually going to help the tendon come back stronger and help the tendon actually rehab and build back to a point where we can start running again. So yes, running is a form of loading, but the type of loading that we're actually looking for is more of this kind of heavy, slow loading, more of the exercises that we'll find in the gym, not your provocative jump style, plyometric style loading that you're going to be doing with your running. So some of the injuries where this isn't relevant is like your stress fracture or like rolling an ankle or some of those, and there's probably a couple of others, but most of these kind of like tendon style overuse injuries, they love load, they love heavy loading in the gym. This is where I think a lot of people are going wrong. They might see a relevant physio or rehab, but they might only provide some low level strength exercises where we go from like a standing bodyweight calf raise to running 4-minute kilometers. So if we do nothing but provide the tendon with some low level stimulus, such as some bodyweight exercises, or if it's in the gym, we're kind of like holding some positions that seem pretty challenging, but we're not actually really giving it that strong stimulus. To get stronger and to kind of build back into what we want to actually do, which is running. So you may see progress initially from resting the injury, but as soon as you try and get back to running, it'll flare up again. So this is one of the big things I think people are getting wrong. They might do the exercises that the physio has prescribed, but sometimes these aren't progressive, or they don't go back to the physio and get more advanced exercises, and then they kind of jump straight back into their running, and what they were doing with their rehab and what they're actually doing with their running are two very different things, and the strength exercises that they have been doing hasn't really prepared them enough to go back into their running, and they're probably going back into it a little bit more aggressively, but more on that a little bit later. So the second area where I think people could really improve upon is trying to go back straight into some high intensity speed work or some high volume running. So we have to remember that while we have had a period of probably unloading or modifying our training load, we have lost a little bit of fitness and we have detrained a little bit. So we can't just jump straight back to what we were doing pre-injury. This has to be slow and steady, and I think a lot of people know this, but for some reason they actually still don't follow returning back slowly. So chances are if you go to a physio or a physical therapist, they might return with 2 minutes worth of running, a minute worth of walking, 3 minutes, and slowly building upon that. We don't just jump straight back into doing 20, 30, 40K weeks, because that particular site of the tendon where you had the injury has detrained, but everything else is detrained around it. So if you just return straight back to what you were doing pre-injury, everything else is going to have a greater risk of getting injured as well, because the capacity of those areas has also declined. So the third area where I think a lot of people could do better is once they start to see a little bit of progress, once they start to see a little bit of decrease in pain, maybe they can return to running and it doesn't feel too bad, they stop doing the exercises that got them there. So they stopped doing the rehab that was prescribed, or they didn't go back to the physio or the physical therapist to get some more advanced exercises so it can help you kind of build back up to where you were. So we see a little bit of a decrease in pain, a little bit more of an improved tolerance to running, and then you drop all the stuff that got you there. We don't always need to be doing the exercises that got you there, but especially early on, as you return back to running, you should be doing some kind of strength exercises. And chances are, if you are running, these should be pretty advanced, they should be pretty heavy, and they should be pretty challenging. So you're kind of getting that later stage and rehab along with the reintroduction of running. It's going to really decrease the chance of you re-injuring yourself, because you're kind of building the tendon in the gym alongside building the tolerance and capacity back up through your running. So I think a lot of people drop the rehab or the strength stuff way too early. I don't think they should drop it at all, to a degree, but they drop it way too early. As soon as they start to see a little bit of progress, they just cut it right back. And this is greatly going to increase the chance of re-injury and the whole kind of detraining, because you're not getting the amount of exercise or the amount of training in, because the chances are you're probably returning on some modified training load as well. So there's a lot more recoverability that you've got to play with through the legs. So what I mean by that is you can be doing some strength stuff and it's not really going to affect your running too much, because you're probably on some modified training load. So you can be doing some advanced strength exercises and plyometrics that are going to help you, again, be better prepared for that kind of higher end rehab, and when you're back to some faster or longer or both running. So number 4 I've got here is you're not really addressing the actual cause of the injury. So sometimes, yeah, obviously with these style of injuries, it's typical that you've spiked the load in some way, shape or form. You've tried, the amount of load you're putting on a particular area doesn't have the capacity to deal with it. It under recovers, or it's just overloaded way too much. And then we start to get a bit of an unhappy tendon. So we kind of have to ask, like, why was it the Achilles? Like, why was it the plantar fascia? Why was it the knee or the hip or the hamstring? And sometimes there are other factors. Most of the time there are other factors that can kind of contribute to why that particular area has flared up. So what I mean by this, I've got a bit of a list here. So it's the running, riding, swimming biomechanics and technique. Have you got your running or swimming form assessed? Got your bike set up, fitted? You could be overstriding with a lower cadence while you're running. Your bike seat height might be loading up a particular area more than it should be. You accumulate a lot of hours on the bike. This is more obviously triathlon, but you accumulate a lot of hours on the bike and you're loading up an area more than you have to, I should say. Does your body have a good level of lower body function, or upper body, but mostly lower body function? Does your foot pronate? Does it have the ability to come up and down and absorb into the ground? Do you have a good range of ankle mobility, hip mobility? Do you have good spine range of motion? When you're running, are you overextending? So all these little areas have to be looked at. Maybe not if you're dealing with a small niggle that kind of hasn't come up before. You hit the nail, you get on top of it and it goes away pretty quick. But if you're dealing with recurring injuries that don't seem to go away, it is worth looking at the bigger picture and starting to see, okay, well, maybe I do need to get someone to actually look at how my lower body is functioning, or my running technique, or whatever it might be, because chances are that you might be able to, along with your rehab back to running and your load management, if you can make some finer adjustments with your technique, that could have a really profound impact on your longevity and your likelihood of getting an injury or a re-injury further down the track. And number 5, so are you picking the low-hanging fruit? Are you approaching this injury holistically? Are you looking at your nutrition? Are you looking at your sleep, your recovery? Are you looking at other lifestyle factors such as your stress, your alcohol intake? Are you looking after your physical and mental health? Are you following a program or a structure? Do you have a coach or someone actually helping you get back to full training? Is your physio helping you with that, or are you managing it all yourself? Are you listening to your body? Are you learning from your mistakes, or are you letting Strava overtake your training load? Are you letting your ego take over? So I think the 5th one is kind of like everything else that fits into this puzzle. If you're dealing with recurring injuries, there's a good chance that you're not hitting all of these areas. Are you looking after? Do you know how much of your nutrition can affect it? Do you know how much your recovery can affect it? Your sleep? Are you running consecutive days? Are you running 3 or 4 days in a row? should you be better off getting a running coach or someone just to help you kind of reintroduce the load back into it, or along the lines of your physio? Are you looking at all of these little things that can have a profound impact on that likelihood of re-injury? There's my top 5. So to recap, we've got number 1, you're completely resting, you're not actually loading that area up. Super common one. Sometimes you feel a little bit of rest, you feel a little bit better with some rest from your provocative load, but load it up in the gym, heavy isometric style of training. Your tendons will absolutely love it. Number 2, are you rushing back into your training? Are you trying to go straight into what you were doing pre-injury? Are you jumping straight back into some speed work, straight back into some higher volume runs? Chances are you're probably doing that as well. Number 3, you start to see a little bit of progress. You're not progressing the strength exercises as it is, but you start to see a little bit of progress and you drop the strength exercises. You just want to, you're a runner and you think that you should just be running. So I think we should look at this as reintroducing back in and beyond. I think there is a place absolutely for strength training, full stop, for runners. Number 4, you aren't addressing the real cause, like more of that biomechanics. Does your lower body function well? How is your run technique? Those types of areas, because if it's a recurring injury, it could definitely, these are worth addressing anyway, but it could definitely be related back to these other bigger factors, such as your biomechanics, running technique, those types of things. And number 5, are you actually picking up everything else, the low-hanging fruit, I would call it? Are you looking after all of these other different aspects? So chances are people could be doing something of everything there. They're not being diligent with their rehab, they're not focusing on their recovery or their sleep or their nutrition, they don't have a coach, they're rushing back into their training, they're not doing the right style of rehab for it, they're not progressing their rehab, and they're dropping their rehab as soon as that starts to feel a little bit better. So you could be doing all of those things, or you could just be doing some of those things. You could just be doing one of those things, and that could be really holding you back. So again, absolutely consult with a relevant kind of physio or rehab professional. But these are the common things that I've seen by working with a lot of endurance athletes the last couple of years. This is where I think a strength and conditioning coach can be really beneficial, because you can kind of walk them through that whole process. Of course, referring out, getting a proper diagnosis and an assessment, but then helping the athlete stay consistent with their rehab program, developing into a strength and plyometric program, making sure they're staying diligent with their loads. Have they got a running coach? Are they following the plan? Are they optimizing all these other areas? This is where I think a strength and conditioning coach can really kind of fit in the gap from like a physio, your endurance coach. I think a strength and conditioning coach can kind of marry everything together and have like an overall view. Obviously, in general, I want to refer out to relevant professionals and run coaches and physios and whoever else we need to get to where we want to be. But this is where I think like an S&C can really be beneficial. So let me know what you think. Chances are some of those kind of ring true for you. Are you dealing with a recurring injury now? I would like to hear about it in the comments. Have you been through this process before? Chances are you might have. So let me know. As always, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.